That idea of a rock bottom was something that went round and round in my head for a really long time. I was of the mind that for somebody to choose a sober life, they had to have hit that rock bottom, that there would have been something in their life that was the defining moment, that was perhaps the intervention or the time when they woke up having either done something so dreadful or been the victim of something so dreadful. The rock bottom was the place where they simply had to push back up from. And it was something that didn't sit quite right with me. It's easier to describe as a series of low points over a very long time.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
Welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. I am pleased to be joined today by Sarah Williamson. Sarah is a recovery coach based in the United Kingdom. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you very much for having me.
So glad to have you. And I'm very excited about our topic today. And, we had a previous conversation about that you don't have to hit rock bottom to get sober. And you have such an interesting sobriety story. And you're definitely an example of that, where someone who I would say, jumped off the boat before a fiery crash, right? And you're definitely a testament in the work that you do as a recovery coach really emphasizes that, hey, if drinking's a problem for you, you can stop.
Absolutely. Yeah. That idea of a rock bottom was something that went round and round in my head for a really long time. I was of the mind that for somebody to choose a sober life, they had to have hit that rock bottom, that there would have been something in their life that was the defining moment, that was perhaps the intervention or the time when they woke up having either done something so dreadful or been the victim of something so dreadful. The rock bottom was the place where they simply had to push back up from. And it was something that didn't sit quite right with me. It's easier to describe as a series of low points over a very long time. And any one of those low points themselves could have turned into disastrous rock bottoms had I pushed the button any further than I was pushing it. And for me, my series of troubling incidences eventually added up to what was my version of a rock bottom, my version of the place when I wanted to and decided to change, but it was not that spectacular war story that I have to tell afterwards, that, this was my defining moment that was so dreadful beyond all others. And I am incredibly grateful not to have that scale of war story.
Yeah, you talk about an unfolding that I was listening to a YouTube video that you did about how it was a series of incidents that all combined, and none of them were overly dramatic, right? Each individual one, you just talk about waking up and, not being able to recall certain things. And, it was very interesting how you described that process.
Yeah. One of the ones that sticks particularly in my mind was an average Friday night, end of the working week. Probably we'd eaten dinner, crashed on the sofa with a large glass of wine in hand, just thinking to myself, the week is done. It's the weekend. Just going to zone out, numb out for a bit. This is how my weekend is going to start off, or, and be able to predict how it was going to end up. And I suddenly had this thought to myself that in the very room where I was sitting was my lovely husband, my two beautiful kids, my dog, in a house that's lovely, in a town that we love. And I had this realization that everything I ever dreamed of was in this room right here, right now with me. What am I doing with this tool in my hand that is taking me away from everything that I wished for, and making me slightly unavailable to my kids and slightly buzzed. And I thought, this isn't the thing that, this is my moment to be present with my kids on a Friday night, to enjoy the rest of the weekend that's coming up. And that was one example. And another one involving my kids was that thought process around how so much of parenting is modeling. And hey, I can tell my kids 10 times to do something and they will choose to ignore me as many times as they like. And the real magic in parenting is showing your kids what you want them to do, rather than keep on telling them or asking them endlessly. And I came to question what I was showing my kids with my behaviors of choosing alcohol as a way to relax. There are so many better ways to relax. Why wasn't I showing my kids what they were? So it was a whole bunch of very conscious little bolts from the blue that really struck me. And then also, as you say, the waking up with the bits of not remembering what went on, the bits of, leaving my phone in the back of a taxi, the bits of, the stuff that all added up to a bigger picture that was painting into something that I didn't really love the look of.
Yeah. What's interesting about your story and your work, and why I wanted to have you on the show, is that there's a lot of emphasis on being alcoholic, not being alcoholic, right? This label of it. And, and I think the label is helpful, especially with people who are alcoholic, right? And there might be people that we discussed, and, and I've met them, that are, they have an addiction problem. Alcohol really doesn't work for them. It's a slow erosion. Maybe they will become alcoholic, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they already are, but it's not a fiery crash scene, right? It's not the big DUI. It's not getting, ripped out of your house and arrested. It's not losing everything in a dumpster kind of story that we associate a lot. And why I think it's so beneficial, the story that you tell, is that you really talk about being able to make the decision of like, hey, you know what? I don't have that huge rock bottom story, but this no longer works for me.
Yeah.
And I can make a different choice.
Yeah. And you're exactly right about that for me, it was about me taking the choice in my hands, because I wasn't a part of any of those dreadful scenes you beautifully described. I didn't have anybody else coming in and saying to me, you have to change or you need to change. These were the thoughts that didn't exist in my or instructions or external influences that were happening. The thing that happened in my head was, I want to change and I don't like the direction that this is heading in. My choice was from an empowered place. I very consciously and tied up in all of that was the thought that I was going to make this choice joyfully. I was not going to say, I'm going to be sober and I am going to feel deprived and naffed off about it and unhappy and miserable. I'm going to make this choice and it's going to be great.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction of just, really wanting to do this because of a better life, right? Yeah. And willingness. Look, and I think we would both agree, sometimes a dramatic moment can give you the willingness, right?
Definitely.
I know, in my drinking career, I had several dramatic moments, and that did help further my awareness that, hey, this is a problem for me. This is no longer working for me, right? Yeah. But it doesn't have to get to that place. And I think that the great thing about recovery now in 2021 is that people stop before they get there a lot more. And I've seen this in 12-step rooms, in support groups, talking with therapists, people identified a lot more. So the awareness is, I think, a lot more now in society. Yeah. Than it used to be, that you don't have to get to this place where everything is burning down and you have zero options. Mm-hmm. You can, when you have options, you can start making decisions that are better for you.
Yes, yeah. I think in the UK we are a little bit behind you in that way of thinking. Definitely, in an average social setting, still for me now will always be where if I'm choosing a lime and soda water or something to drink that is not a glass of wine, there will always be a set of questions with an expectation that the answer would be, are you pregnant? Are you on medication? Are you an alcoholic? Those would be your reasons why you aren't drinking a glass of wine, at some sort of social event. But I feel happy to be forward of where other people are going to get to at some point. I feel very happy, and I wasn't in the beginning, but now I'm really pleased to say, I'm not drinking because I feel better without it. I'm not putting myself back into the place where I used to be.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating about the sober curious movement too, of people just saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to take October off and not drink. And this is a big thing in the States right now that people are just going to take the month off. As somebody who's alcoholic and been in recovery for a long time, I kind of laughed at it. Like, I don't get that really. Right. Okay. Yeah. But there are people that are on that spectrum, if we will, right? They're not quite there, but maybe they're on their way there. And I love your work because you deal a lot with the social aspect of it. Like, how can somebody decide that they, hey, this just no longer works for me. I don't know what label I am right now, but I know it doesn't work for me and I want to make the change, and I'll figure that out later as this unfolds. But how do I live day-to-day life if my spouse is still drinking or I have to go to a party? And you provide a lot of those tips about how to make that transition into a sober life easier.
I navigate a lot around what I would call the gray area of drinking, which is a place where I would have considered myself to sit for a long time. If I were to think of my Auntie Doris, who might only ever have drank a glass of sherry at Christmas and no more, and then consider there to be a spectrum that goes upwards from that, I bounced around for a long time in that zone of binge drinking, going through periods definitely of sobriety. I was no stranger to dry January and sober October, where I was doing those types of challenges, let's call them, to provide myself with the evidence that I didn't have a problem with that, or, to prove to my friends that I don't have a problem because, look, I can just stop for a month. So therefore, I'm okay. And what came out of all of that thinking over time was not so much about the ability to stop drinking for a little while, the ability to recognize that the binge drinking bits were doing me no favors whatsoever. More a question of, how is this serving me overall? And the answer always was unequivocally that it isn't serving me at all. But I had to keep on testing it. I kept going and testing it and getting it wrong over and over until I came to that conclusion, sort of along those series of, small events that led up to the decision. And I think a lot of people sit in what I would call that grey area with their drinking, not quite being happy and comfortable with it, but also not being ready to make a change with it because they are worried about all of those questions that you just started to, my spouse, how will I navigate a social event? That fear keeps people stuck. And if there's someone who can help, then that's good.
And really, it is about getting unstuck and being able to unfold more right in your life. And I love what you were talking about earlier in the show about your children. And one of the benefits, I think, to the whole sober curious movement and people stopping drinking that don't have a problem with alcohol at all, really, they don't. And they're just stopping drinking, is that it brings awareness that people can make a choice not to drink. And I think that this is good, because I remember as a kid, when I first got sober, somebody asked me, hey, do you know anyone that's sober in your life? And I said, I don't know anyone who doesn't drink in my whole life. I was 28. I never had met anyone. Maybe I did, but I didn't know it. Right.
Yes.
So I just didn't even, that wasn't even in my consciousness that someone could actually get and stay sober. It was a shock to me. And, but now I see my kid, we have open dialogues about, drinking and people that, and I tell the kids, my nieces and nephews, hey, listen, out of 10 people, 2 to 3 of the 10 people will identify with some sort of addiction issue to a substance, whether that's drugs, alcohol, even shopping, gambling, any of that stuff. Right. So I think it's so important for the next generation to have this open dialogue. So they don't feel that, okay, well, hey, everything's on fire in my life now. Now I have to make some sort of change, and that this is the only option, that there was options long before that.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And something my 13-year-old said just recently, we're going on holiday next week, and we were talking about the places that there'll be to eat nearby and, what we're going to enjoy while we're there. And just in casual conversation, out of his mouth came, oh, well, you won't care about there not being wine or whatever it was, he said, because you don't drink. And it was just a real casual, yes, I don't drink, so it won't matter, and we carried on as we were, the conversation diverted off somewhere else. And I thought, oh, I'm so pleased that he's got a frame of reference in his life where he can see that doesn't have to be the path for him. He's got someone in his life who he can see, who's living a life that I hope looks good to him and doesn't involve any alcohol.
Absolutely, because whether or not the kid ever has an alcohol problem, right? The odds of someone in his inner circle, a friend, a coworker, a schoolmate, somebody that is going to have it, that they can actually see, hey, that's a problem. Yeah. Like, we can intervene here, right? Because there are statistically, there are going to be people that are alcoholics and drug addicts and have major addiction problems just in the tribe of people that we belong to in day-to-day life. And the ability to be able to see that and say, wow, you know what? We can stop this before it gets to this place where there's no return.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And, the holidays, we're talking about some of these sober practices. And I know a lot of times with your clients, you go over these sober practices. How am I going to do this sober? How am I going to do that sober? And, we were talking the other day because the holidays are coming up and they're really upon us, really, right? And we were talking about that. It's not even necessarily the alcohol itself. It's the alcohol is woven into so much of the traditions that we do, right? It's like, if we were allergic to strawberries, we just wouldn't eat strawberries and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But alcohol, doesn't it seem to be just woven into every tradition we have?
Yeah. I was having a crazy conversation with a friend just recently. I don't know if this sounds like something that would happen where you are, but part of the fundraising activities that goes on in schools here around Christmas fairs and Christmas markets and things in schools. One of my friends' kids had been there. They were having a non-uniform day. I know that's not a thing for you guys, but they were having a non-uniform day. And the contribution that the children were asked to bring into school to donate then to the school fair that was going on was to bring in a bottle of alcohol to donate to the school fair, asking the kids to bring in a bottle of alcohol to school. And I just thought, wow, the kids could have bought a pound in, or could have bought a bar of soap, or could have bought anything for the raffle, but they were specifically asked to bring a bottle of alcohol. Now, of course, plenty of parents will choose to send their kid in with a bottle of soda or whatever is right for that household. But the fact that it's even sent home in a school letter, a communication, that there will be 4-year-olds walking into school on the day that they have to take their donation in with bottles of wine and bottles of beer. What is going on? It's mad. And a head teacher put that out because she thought that was okay. No judgment. I wouldn't like to be a head teacher right now. But, all of the stuff that's tied up around Christmas for us, our big work social nights out, our friendship group nights out, all of those things were so alcohol fueled in my life and are in society general. And now I'm really pleased to be able to choose different socializing activities in the run up to Christmas as I would the same as the other 11 months in my year. And couldn't be happier about that.
Yeah. The alcohol is so infused in everything that we do, and the advertising and the whole mythology behind alcohol. Any ad you see, any story you hear that's very pro alcohol always is glamorous. It's sexy. It's the best time that you've ever had. And rarely are people's alcohol experiences like that, right? Rarely. I even look back, my alcohol experiences weren't really like that, but most of them, right? And so it's so infused in everything we do, and it's fed to us all the time, that this idea that like, hey, you know what? I don't have to go down that path. And, and I know a lot of people now too, because the whole theme of this show really is just hitting rock bottom. I know I have people in my life, especially younger people that have come from homes that had alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever. And they've never had a problem with drugs and alcohol. And they've just made a choice that they just don't want that in their life, that it's not just a positive element in their life anymore. And that they're just deciding, hey, you know what? I just don't, it's just nothing that I really want to be involved with. And they just simply say no right from the beginning. And how powerful is that?
Yeah. Brilliant choice. Yeah. I like it.
So final thoughts here, Sarah. If people are out there and they're thinking, wow, you know what? I'm thinking about trying the sober thing, but I really everything is okay. I don't feel great about any of the stuff I'm doing, but everything's okay. My house isn't burning to the ground. I haven't lost my job. The spouse hasn't walked out. The kids are still talking to me. What would be your message to them?
My message to them would be that they are telling me a story that they are describing as not bad enough to stop. And I would say that is brilliant. Is it good enough for you? Is not bad enough, good enough, and exactly where you want to be? And if it is, then great. But that there is an alternative, and it's a really joyful alternative. And I started out without the intention to be sober for the rest of my life. I started out with what I called a little life experiment, and I decided that I wouldn't drink for a year just to see how my life felt without it. And in choosing a year as a goal, that felt like a stretch for me. I was a bit twitchy about whether it was possible or not, but because it felt like a stretch goal, I thought, okay, I'm going to go for this, set out and see how it goes. Now, I've never looked back because I didn't realize the benefits that it was going to bring me back then. And if past me could go back and future me could go back and chat to past me, I'd have a brilliant story to tell them. And that would be the brilliant story that I'd want to pass on to other people.
Sarah Williamson, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Where can they find more about you and your work?
Yep, I can be found on the website, drinklesslivebetter.com. Everything about me is on there.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We're also going to put a full profile on Sarah on Recovered Life, so you can check her out there. And thanks so much for coming on today.
It's been a joy. Thank you.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.